Hi and welcome to the Home Assistant How-To with Bearded Thinker. Today we are going to work some more with GitHub, but we will also try and add Travis integration. We'll start in a couple of seconds. Before we begin today's episode, I really would like to thank all the members who have joined my channel. Thank you. Your support means a lot. And now let's get back to video. In last video, we worked on splitting our configuration into separate files, and that way we can manage it more easily. Of course, for this process, it doesn't matter if you are having your configuration split into various files, or you have configuration that's separated into specific files, for example, entities related to switches, scenes, binary sensors in a separate file, or even if you have one long configuration file that includes everything in it. Publishing your configuration on GitHub as a private repository works in any case. But before we proceed with the process, let's first tackle some of the prerequisites and requirements. First thing, you need to have your GitHub account. If you are using HACS as the integration, you already have a GitHub present. If you are reluctant to publish your configuration for whole world to see, inspect and tackle, of course you can do it by publishing it privately. Privately means that nobody, and I mean really nobody except you, has access to that configuration. So any changes you make there, anything you publish there, it will remain private and only you have access to it. Of course, it's possible for you to add specific people who have access to that repository, so that way you manage who will be able to see what you have published. The third option for you, something that I've done to my configuration, is of course to make it public. That way anybody can see the configuration. Before we go any further with this, there are a couple of warnings. First off, it is mandatory for you to be using secrets inside your configuration to handle anything that is private information, account information, really any kind of information that can expose either your home system or your private data or your online accounts. So be sure to have a secrets file present and also go through your YAML files and check if everything has been cleaned and moved to secrets.yaml file. Second thing is that you also have to list, or let's call it like that, unlist some specific files that can contain also private information. For example, one of those files is known devices because it contains MAC addresses or IP addresses or specific identifiers that can compromise your security, potentially. What are the steps? First step, of course, is for you to go to GitHub and create your own private repository. Let's do that. Here is my GitHub account, and here, as you can see, I have a couple of repositories that are public, but I also have one repository that is private. Since we want to copy our configuration online and make it only visible to us, let's create new repository, and it will be private one. Click on a new, and there are only two or optionally three things we need to do here. First of all, we need to give it a name. For me, since I'm creating additional repository, I already have Home Assistant configuration repository. I will create a new one named Home Assistant config. And as you can see, this one is already occupied, but I will add trailing rack for recording. Next thing is the option that you must do if you want to make your repository private. Click next to private. Third thing that it's optional is to leave a comment. I'll leave a comment here. This repository contains Home Assistant configuration from my recording setup. We will not be clicking here on add readme file. We can add it later. It's very simple. Also, we will not be clicking on gitignore because we will do it manually. And you have a third option is to choose a license. Anything that you skip now, you can of course add later. For now, this is all that we need. So we need to enter repository name. We need to select if we want to have private, because default is public repository. And we will now press create repository. And you will be welcomed with a screen like this. We can at this point disregard this if you want, and if you are using, for example, VS Code on your local machine, not just as add-on or a Docker inside your Home Assistant or on the Synology, you can set up a GitHub on desktop computer and have a local VS Code editor to manage your configuration independently from the Home Assistant. For example, on my computer, and not the recording one, the one that I use for managing everything, on that computer I do have a GitHub desktop, and I also have VS Code, and there I have clones of all the repositories that I track, manage, or just are interested in. Okay, so this step is now done. Next step that you need to do on your system is install Git. Let me try to explain what Git is, and I sincerely apologize to any connoisseurs of the GitHub technology, but let me put it like this. Git is the tool that enables you to connect your local repository with the online repository. It enables you to track what files have changed, how they changed, and also it manages a merger between the repositories, online repositories and your local repository. So from now on, after we initialize this Git tool, all files here will be part of our local repository. And files that will be online are, of course, online repository. Git itself can be installed very easily. For that, you need to have access to your Linux machine. In this video, I will definitely not even mention installing Git on the Windows machine, because presumably 99.9% people that do run Home Assistant run it on some kind of Linux machine. It can be Raspberry Pi, it can be Ubuntu, or it can even be Synology, as I do. First thing, let's tackle the Linux Git installation. For that, we have to open our terminal and let's log into our Linux machine. So let's pretend we are not on Synology machine. In that case, what you would do is you would log in to your Linux machine and type following: sudo apt-get update, and this command would then update everything on your system repositories, and this would get the latest updates for your system. And next command that you would run is sudo apt-get install git, and by pressing enter, system would then download all the necessary files and dependencies, install it, and have it ready for you to run it. But since I'm running this on a Synology, there is even easier way to do that. Let's close this terminal window and let's go to Synology DSM. Now that we are in a Synology DSM, let's go to Package Center. And let's go to Community tab here. If you do not see Community tab, what you have to do is you have to click on the Settings, Package Sources, and add SynoCommunity package source. While you are here, also make sure that you tick box next to yes, I want to see beta versions. Let's go to Community. And let's scroll until we find a package called Git. So if you are using Synology, you do not have to do anything inside the terminal window. All you have to do is you have to press on install to get this package installed. Let me quickly do that. If during the installation process for the Git you receive fails to install Git, this package is not published by Synology Incorporated, you also have to go to Settings, and change the trust level to any publisher and click OK. Let's try to install it once again. And the package is now running. We can close this window and we can also close DSM. At this point, we have created the new repository, private repository, that no one has access to except us, and we also installed Git on our Linux/Synology machine, so we will be able to synchronize file between the online and offline repository. Next step for us is to create one additional file. So let's add here new file, and now let's call it gitignore. You have to be careful to name it correctly, so it's .gitignore. If everything is correct, you should also see a GitHub icon next to it. Let's press enter. And here we have to create a list of files that we want to be included in our configuration, and also a list of all the files, directories, etc. that we want to be excluded. The easiest way to do it is to go to sharing your configuration on GitHub webpage on the Home Assistant website and copy the example file from there. So let's do that. So this is the part that we already did. We installed and initialized Git. Now we have to copy this example and paste it inside our system. Let's paste it here. And let's look at what those files are and how we can improve them. This is the example, a gitignore file, but it can suit our needs for now. This asterisk or this star means that we want everything to be ignored. And if you want to add anything, what you do, you put exclamation mark in front of it. So this means that we want to include every YAML file, every gitignore file, and every MD file, as in readme.md. We want to ignore folders storage, cloud, and Google token. And also we explicitly list here name of the files that we want to ignore completely. For this scenario, let me also include one additional file. As you can see, I have configuration file here. I can also add this file to the ignore list. Let's press rename, select everything, copy it, go to gitignore and add the name of that specific file to the list of the files that need to be ignored. Please be very careful with the files you're posting. GitHub can be very unforgiving in terms of publishing your configuration, and that means that if you push now your configuration that has some files in it or that has some data in it, even if you change that data or remove that file, the previous version of that file or previous version of that line of code you changed will be available through history or change list. Be careful. If you do make a mistake and publish something that you do not want others to see, it's not easy to remove in terms of removing only one line of code or removing one file, but it's easy to mitigate. You just have to go back to GitHub, go to settings, and on the end of the settings page, there is the option to delete this repository, and by deleting the repository, you are really removing all the files and all the history for that repository from GitHub. And the next step for you would be to once again recreate the repository with the same name. Don't worry, before I made my configuration public, it was private for a couple of weeks or months, and I did remove and recreate the repository at least 15 to 20 times because there were mistakes and I pushed some information that I didn't want others to see. Even if you do make a mistake and push something, just delete the repository, recreate new one, and then continue publishing it either privately or publicly. Hopefully, at this point, we have created everything we need. We have also gone through the files themselves and checked if there is any kind of personal information there. And the next step for us would be to publish the changes into private repository. This is done through the terminal. So let me once again open the terminal box. Let's connect to our Linux/Synology machine. And here we have to type a couple of commands, but we need to be inside our Home Assistant configuration folder. So let's go to that folder. cd volume 1 docker has.io Home Assistant. If we list files here, you will see that those files match the files we have in our Visual Studio Code or file editor. So these are our configuration files. Let's clear the screen. And now we can proceed with the initialization and connecting our offline, meaning local, and online, meaning cloud repositories. Let's type git init. As you can see, the GitHub has been now initialized. What this has done, it means that Git has now gone through our repository, offline repository, local repository, and it selected all the files that it wants to prepare for upload to cloud. Let's go back to Home Assistant and see the difference now. As you can see, here we have now files, some of them are grayed out, some of them are green, and do have a trailing letter. This letter means that this change so far was untracked. Untracked means that we still haven't committed that file to online repository, and after we add it, if we make any change, this letter would be M. Also, in Visual Studio Code, you have this option now called Source Control, and if you click on it, you will see the list of all the files that will be added to our private GitHub repository. So this is gitignore and couple of main YAML files here. If we go back, you will see that something is missing. And the missing files are files inside integrations folder and sensors folder. If we would commit our files now, then some of the files would not be available online. Let's go back to gitignore and let's check what is the problem with our gitignore file. Since we have a file here, this ensures that everything will be ignored. We can play a little bit more with that and just ignore files that we do not want listed. So let's add, for example, here .log, .db, .db.sha. And since we now listed only files that we do not want listed here, and let's also add wildcard.conf. At this point, as you can see, all the other files are visible. So all the green files will be added. Let's go back to source control and let's check if here is anything that we do not want to be included. So there are a lot of Python files. These files are part of the custom components. There are also some JSON files, and we do not want to have JSON files also. These are also parts of the custom components, so we can list a couple of extensions more. So .py, .json, wildcard.pyc. And as you can see now, the list of components we do not want to list it is much shorter. Next thing, I see here that there is a file .gz zip. I'll add it also here. There is some JavaScript files. I'll also exclude those files. And from 366, I think, files, we've come down to 47. Let's go once again through things here. So we have YAML file, YAML file, YAML file. We have gitignore, again YAML file, CSV file, and we also have one backup file. Let's add backup also here. Let's save this. As you can see now, most of our YAML files will be replicated and copied into our online repository. If we go back here, you can see that some of the repositories will not be copied. For example, HACS will be, but binary sensor, for example, folder will not be replicated into our online repository. If you have some empty folders, but you still want to retain those empty folders, what you can do is you can create a specific file, and people usually call this file .gitkeep. And this file is usually used by people to remind themselves that even if this folder is empty, that this folder will also be copied or replicated into online repository. As you can see, this file will be copied, but we can still add it to the whitelist .gitkeep. So now our configuration is ready. We have initialized the local GitHub repository. We have created private cloud repository on the GitHub itself. And now it's time to go back to the terminal. Next thing for us is to configure username and email that will be used to identify us when we make a change or commit to GitHub. This is done very easily by the command. Let's type git config user.email and inside quotation marks, and here you just type your email address. Please use the one that you use to create your online account. In theory, it could be something else, but by using the same email, you are making sure that any commit you do is connected directly to your account. You need to do this only once. After you configure it, it will remain in the system. Next thing is we want to specify our name, so it will be git config user dot name. Once again, bearded tinker. And let's press enter. Next command is to add our files to the queue that will be uploaded to the GitHub. This is done by typing git add dot. If you are using non-super user account or non-root account, you may encounter error like this. To overcome it, just type sudo git add and dot. Type in your password for the super user account. And the last part or the last command is git commit. This command is used to push all the local files and local changes to our online repository. Let's start once again with sudo superuser do git commit. Next step is something also you have to do only once. This is on initial load. You have to give a comment that will be appended to all the files here. So next time you go inside the GitHub repository, every file will have a comment besides it. Since this is our initial load, we can just type here initial commit of my recording configuration. And in order to exit the editor, you just press Ctrl+C. Okay? Then press column, W, Q, and exclamation mark. This gives command write any changes, quit. At this point, we have prepared everything for the initial commit. We've configured our online account. We configured our configuration down below. Once again, make sure that secrets.yaml file is correctly configured. As you can see, this file is missing from the list here because we put it on an ignore list. And the last step is to synchronize our local repository and online repository. Let me clear the screen. And let's type following: sudo git remote add origin, followed by the full URL of our repository. let's briefly change screen and let me show you what this URL is. So this is our private repository we created previously. As you can see here, name of the repository is home-assistant_config_recording. This is my username. And if we look at the URL, this is the URL that we need to type as origin in the terminal. You can copy it here and paste it inside terminal, or you can just type it. It's pretty straightforward. https github.com bearded tinker home assistant config rec for recording. As I said, you have two options: either copy it from the web browser or just type it here. It always consists of first part, that is the URL of GitHub, second part is your username, and the third part is the name of the repository itself. Let's press enter. And now that we have connected or added remote origin to our repository, last part is to push everything in the repository itself. So this will be sudo git push u origin master. So we are pushing everything that has been untracked so far to origin and inside the branch called master. Let's press enter. Let's type username and password. Let me try it once again. And finally, I managed to remember my password, and at this point our repository should be updated and contain the same files we are having locally. Let's check the online repository, and as you can see, we now have one commit. This is the comment that we posted in the file, and these are the files that we added for our commit. There is one thing also. If you, for example, want to make sure that everything you post online is also passing the configuration check, meaning that you can use that as some kind of backup. But please note that not all of the files the system needs and the system uses as a configuration are now saved. For example, we are missing complete directory that's called storage, and in the storage folder we are keeping all the configuration for the integrations that are done through the user interface, plus some additional information in regard to our Lovelace user interface, etc. So as I said, this is, let's call it a backup system, but not full backup, and you still need to make regular backup copies. But as I was trying to say is, if you want to make sure that this configuration itself would work, for example, if you lose the system and you want to download all the files from here, or if you want to give it to your friend, relative, or public, and you want to make sure that when they download this repository, they are able to install and have the system up and running using your configuration, this checking can be done with a tool called Travis. Let me open a new window. So this is Travis, and this tool is used to test your configurations, or to be more precise, this tool is not used to test your configuration, but this is online testing tool for projects. But our project currently is our configuration. This tool can be used free of charge. All you have to do is sign up. And since we are using GitHub, we can use our GitHub integration to sign up to Travis. Let's go back to dashboard. One thing that you have to do is you have to authorize Travis CI to have access to your repositories. I have already authorized my account. Let me sync it up here once again. As I said, what Travis does, Travis checks against your configuration and build instructions if you could build your system using your configuration with the latest available deployment files, meaning that it downloads the latest version of Home Assistant, it inserts your configuration inside Home Assistant, it triggers the build, and you get the error if it's passing or failing. If it's failing, then it means that something in your configuration file is missing and you need to add that thing to make it build. The goal for this is, of course, to have green configuration, meaning that every build you make is passed. This is how it looks inside already existing system. And to make it work, I did have to create a Travis build file where I inserted a couple of prerequisites to install inside the system, so I was able to finish building of the system. But in order for you to get your repository seen here, there is a catch. Only public repositories can be seen using travis.cy.org, meaning that if you want this tool to check your configuration, you have to make your repository public. If you do not want to do that and you want to keep your private repository, then you would need to use travis.ci.com, which is a commercial product that you purchase and then you can build or check your private projects. So let's pretend that we want to make our configuration public and that we also want to make Travis check it. Let's go back to Home Assistant for that. And here we need to create one additional file. Let's do that. File needs to be called .travis.yml. Please note that this is YML, not YAML. Okay? And let's create it. Once again, what you can do, you can copy the sample from the share your configuration on GitHub webpage. I'll paste something I prepared earlier. More or less, this is the same as in the example. The only thing I did change a little bit of spacing so I can read this more easily. Let's save this. So let's look at what this file does. First thing, we are defining that we want Travis to use Python as a language and that we need version of Python to be 3.7 or 3.7. Next, before installation begins, we want to move Travis secret, travis_secrets.yaml file into secrets.yaml file. This is something that we still have to do. We will have to create a travis_secrets.yaml file, and in this file we will create mock-up of all our personal and protected data, meaning that if we have API key, we will give it a fake API key. If we have username and password, we will give it a fake username and fake password, and so on. Next thing is to install a dependency that will be needed for building later on, and after that we instruct it to install Home Assistant. After everything is done, last thing that the Travis needs to do is to run script called checkconfig. Okay, so let's create additional file, new file, and we will call it Travis secrets.yaml. And how do you populate this Travis secrets file? The easiest way to do it is to go to your secrets.yaml file that isn't uploaded or kept synced with the cloud repository. Select everything that is here, and I do apologize since a lot of this will be now masked. Go back to your Travis secrets file, paste everything here, then slowly go through every line of the travis_secrets file now and replace any value you have here with some dummy value. For example, I have here my Syno host, the IP address of the Synology. I can put here 192.168.99.199. And everywhere I have the IP address, I can just replace it with that same value. For the port, you can leave it as is. For usernames, you can type, I don't know, 6 times x. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's call it 8. And the same thing can be done with the passwords. So everywhere you have password, you just replace it with those x's. Now what we are left with is we were left with the email addresses, and let's change them. name.lastname@mail.com. Let's replace all our email addresses with that fake address. And the last thing that we are missing, or last thing that needs to be replaced, is our API keys. And for that, let's type, I don't know, 16 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Let's make it 20. 17, 18, 19, 20. So we now have 20 zeros. And those 20 zeros will be, let's call it, placeholders for the APIs. And voila! The file is unmasked. Now you can finally look at my secrets file. So we have here all our identifiers or all our variables. And I replaced every username and every password with x's. Every IP address I replaced with a fake IP address. Also the same thing goes for the username or mail address and the password for the mail account. API key was replaced with 20 zeros, and at this point we are set and ready to update this in our repository. So the question is, okay, yeah, we've so far committed our initial load on the repository. What we did else is we also prepared file for Travis build, but how do you make changes on your local configuration available in cloud? And we have 4 changes. Well, 2 of them are really just deletion of the files that I forgot to add. One of the changes that needs to be pushed is this new travis.yml file, and the other change is this newly created travis_secrets.yaml file. Let's now go to our terminal screen once again. Now we have reached the point where we have to select if we are going to do this by hand every time or if we want to create script. In terms of the command itself, whatever we type in the script is the same thing that we would need to type each time we want to update our online repository. So to make this easier, what I'll do, I'll create a script. And this script will be invoked every time from this point forward when I want to update my online repository with the changes I've made on my Home Assistant. Since we are currently in a configuration folder, I want to make sure I have right privileges here. So I'll start with a sudo vi gitupdate.sh as a shell script. Let's type in the password for the sudo account. If you need help with the script, you can once again go to the sharing your configuration on GitHub documentation on the website. As with everything, the link to that website will be down in the comment section of the video. Let's first type letter E for insert, and let's start typing #bin bash. This is telling system what we want to invoke as a processor for our shell command. Next, let's change directory because this script will be invoked in some folder other than the configuration folder. So we want to make sure that we change to our configuration folder. So it's cd for change directory, volume 1, docker has.io, and home assistant. Okay. Next, we want to instruct Git to add all the files. Git add dot. And we want Git to present us with the status. Following line is used to present us with a text saying that we need to enter the change. So it's echo and enter the description for the change. Let's close quotation mark, double colon, let's close the quotation mark, let's add space, and let's type minor update. Okay, and next line we'll be waiting for our description of the change, and it will save that description or our text inside change underscore message. Now we want to commit this change, so git commit m, open the quote, $, change message. Let's close this bracket and let's close the quotes. And the last line before exit will be git push origin master. And if you remember, we previously created origin definition. This is our GitHub repository. And last line is exit. Okay, after you've done that, press escape, WQ, write and quit, exclamation mark. And this is it. Our file is now saved. The problem now is that this file is not where we want it to be. This shell script needs to be run as a root, and unfortunately root folder, main root folder is not this one. If we look at the files we have here in our home assistant configuration directory, we can see that this gitupdate.sh is here. And we need to move that file to main folder where root user or privileged user can access this shell script and run it. To do that, let's type sudo -i. Let's clear this. And if we look, this folder is empty. What we need to do, we need to copy that shell script from the volume1 docker has.io home assistant folder. So the name of the script was gitupdate.sh, and we want to have it here with the same name, gitupdate.sh. Let's list, and as you can see, the shell script itself is now here. Let's list it like this. How do you run this script? Well, each time, as I said, when you make any kind of a change to your repository, you can either type all of the lines that are listed here, or as we did, we created a script, you just need to run it. Let's see if we need to set up privileges for the script, gitupdate.sh. And when you run it, you will see the following on the screen. Remember what we did inside the script, so we changed the folder to the Home Assistant configuration folder, and we are now telling first Git to add all files and next to give us status. So this is the status. There is one new file, Travis update. There is also one additional new file, gitupdate.sh, because we left it in there in that folder. And we also have a new file, Travis secrets. You can disregard that. That was something that I forgot to add at first in the gitignore folder. So we have here prompt asking us to enter description of the update, and we have typo here, but nevertheless it's working. So let's type here adding Travis support, and let's press enter. Next thing, we will be asked to enter our username for the GitHub, and of course password. Let's try to type correct password this time, and it's done. How do you know that this is done? Well, if we go back to our repository, we can see that now we have two commits. One was the initial commit of my recording configuration, and the other one was adding Travis support. So anytime you make any kind of a change to your configuration and inside the Visual Studio Code, you see in the source control that you have some changes that are uncommitted. You have to run that script. And now this part is done. In order for us to finish configuring Travis, next step is to make our configuration public. For the purpose of this video, I will not be making a private repository with travis.com checking. I will go with the free version, travis.org. So how do you make your configuration public and private once again if you want to? Click on the settings, scroll to the bottom of the page and select here change visibility. Click on make public. This is the information that will now be changed. In this field you have to retype this text. I'll copy it. And if you really do understand what changing repository visibility means that everybody can see your configuration, click on I understand change repository visibility. Let's type in here the password, confirm. Now our repository is not tagged with the private anymore. Let's go to Travis dashboard. I still only have one repository because I need to resync my account. Go to settings, sync account, and here you should now see a new repository. And this repository is called Home Assistant config rec. So this is the one that we just created and made public. Let's tick the box next to it. If you want, you can go to settings and see if anything needs changing, but default version should be okay here. Let's go to dashboard and let's trigger a build. Travis will now, as we said previously, take our configuration and go through the script we created previously. Let's click here. And as you can see, job was received, it was initiated, and now it started building. Here is the information for the worker. This is the build system information. You'll notice that the build language is Python. It should be Python because Home Assistant works in Python. And now slowly Travis will begin to go through the script. It has done what we instructed it to do before. So it has moved Travis secrets to secrets.yaml file. It has downloaded and installed libudev-dev, and it is now installing Home Assistant. This process can take some time. Usually it's done between 2 and 3 minutes. Testing of the configuration has finished. Your build exited with 0, and 0 is something that we want our build to exit with. Let's go to the top. And everything is green, meaning that our configuration is passing the Travis build. If we go back to our repository, let's go to code. You will see one new flag added here. This is the green flag. So how will this work in the future? How will Travis test your system? Each time you make any kind of commit, meaning that each time you run that script we created previously, commits will be pushed to a GitHub repository. Travis will detect changes in the repository. It will pull that configuration. It will run itself and give you the flag either green for passed or red cross for failed. I apologize because I know that this video was too long, but I wanted to make one video that will include both pushing the configuration to GitHub and also Travis support, because those two things work together so well. If you did find information in this video useful, please give me a thumbs up, it means really a lot to me. And this is it for today's Home Assistant how-to with Bearded Thinker. Of course, if you have any kind of a question or a comment, you can always find me on the Discord server, or you can try reaching me by using the comment section down below. All the links to all the repositories, web pages, etc. will of course be in the description of the video. If you still haven't subscribed, please subscribe and hit the bell button so you get notified on the future updates. And I'll be seeing you soon. Until then, bye bye and have fun.